Welcome to the first in the series of roundtable discussions presented by American Business Associates in conjunction with East Main Media. I'm your host, Bob Putt, Director of American Business Associates in New Jersey. Today we have assembled a group of experts from the financial, legal, and medical communities, along with a recovering COVID patient, to answer the questions of what you need to know about reopening your business. Let's meet our group of experts. First, we have Cheryl Mucha, owner of CFO Your Way. Representing the legal community, we have Deena Rosendahl, employment and labor attorney, partner with Kaufman, Semeraro, and Leibman, and a medical preparedness expert, Chad Blecker, who is a partner in Seniors in Place. Our special guest today is a COVID-19 survivor, Dennis Mojares of Eagle Rock Wealth Management. Thank you all for coming and agreeing to sit in on this first series of roundtables. I would also like to welcome our Zoom audience who is live for this production. The objective of today's discussion is to gain insight of what owners need to know and need to be aware of as they open their business. Let's begin with this legal insight with Deena Rosendahl. Deena, please tell us what companies need to know and what are the requirements for reopening your business.
Sure, Bob. Thanks for having me. The first thing all businesses, regardless of industry, need to be mindful of is the state and federal regulations. So depending on where your business is physically located, how you reopen is going to vary. Not only do you need to know the federal and your state regulations, but some municipalities are also entering resolutions, changing ordinances about how your business can operate. So sort of from the 18,000 feet view, you need to understand what your state and local municipality is regulating. Once you have that knowledge, it's really critical that all businesses implement some new policies. We all are used to operating in a certain way, but in the wake of COVID, the way we operate our business is going to be different. What I mean by that is I'm going to just highlight a few areas, but of course it's going to vary based on your type of business as well as the location. We've all heard about social distancing. That's pretty much a requirement across the board, but that's going to mean something different based on your workplace. Do you need to post signs alerting your employees about the requirement to social distance? Some states are requiring sign postage, others are not. Mask wearing. You have to understand the difference between when it's required versus when is it recommended, and you need to let your employees know that. Large gatherings. How many people are you allowed to have in what size space? Just because your state is now allowing your business to operate, there's most likely going to be size limitations, and that might require you to change people's schedules. You might be doing a staggered schedule. So you need to implement policies letting your employees know all of this when they come back to the workplace. Another policy that's important to have is the personal protective equipment hygiene protocol. Do you have cleaning products around your workplace for your employees? Are you requiring mask wearing of your employees versus your visitors? Your employees need to know this so that they can help you implement and enforce your own policies. The next policy that's really critical is you're going to need to change your sick leave and your attendance policy. Congress has enacted the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which gives you additional leave time above and beyond what businesses are already providing to their employees. So employers need to understand that there are 6 stated reasons that are related to COVID. If you have an employee that reports one of those reasons and needs time off from work, you have a legal obligation to give them a certain amount of time at a certain rate of pay above and beyond what you're already providing. With your attendance policy, you also want to require your employees to not come to work if they have any illness. This is a big change. We're used to showing up for work with a cold or maybe even a low-grade fever in some instances. That's a big no-no in this environment. So you want to implement a policy letting your employees know that. That's just the highlights of some of the policies. Again, I would urge employers to seek out their legal counsel in their state to find out what the regulations actually are. And really critical to this too is whatever advice you're given today, keep following up with your counsel, because it's going to change over the weeks and months as we move through the different stages of reopening.
Well, thank you very much. It's very insightful. I'm sure there'll be a lot of changes coming down the road. Seems to be, if not week to week, month to month. So thank you for your insight. I appreciate it very much. Cheryl, good morning.
Good morning,
We'll
Bob.
move from the legal aspects to the financial aspects. And what do businesses need to do in order to financially prepare for reopening?
It's all about planning, Bob. Most companies concentrate on their revenue cycle and revenue goals, but now during this time, it's all about cash flow. Cash is king, always has been king, but it's more of a king now at this point. We work with our clients to do cash flow projections, very detailed cash flow projections, 13 weeks out at least, and keep it rolling forward so that you always know what's coming down the pike. Business owners need to open their minds to the fact that cash may go quicker than they think it will, and they need to know when they're going to run into trouble with their cash and be able to make changes today to alleviate or make that position less critical.
I know that your company works very well with forecasting. Would you like to speak to that a little bit, please?
Well, not only cash flow forecasting, but revenue forecasting as well. It's just critical to know where you are today and where you're going to be months, weeks, and even into next year.
I thank you very much. I appreciate all your insight. And
Thank
now we'll
you.
move to the medical community. And Chad Blecker. Chad, if you don't mind, can you please speak to how companies need to create a safe workplace as they reopen during this pandemic?
Absolutely, Bob, and thank you for having me. I think it comes down to three pillars. Being in my company and being in a situation where we're providing hands-on care right to our at-risk population, it's been so important to take care of everyone. And it's kind of, you see it in a microcosm, it's right there. So what we're talking about is the three pillars that we're utilizing is making sure that all of our employees, not only have we followed all of the CDC procedures, which is very encouraged, you have to follow all the CDC processes. The pillar comes down to your clients, keeping all of your clients safe and taking care of them and making sure that they perceive that you're doing all of the right things, that you have the right PPE, that your employees are all being taken care of and have the right PPE. We start with taking care of the clients, we take care of, and that can be anything, it's not industry specific. You have to make sure that your employees feel safe, they feel supported, that in the workplace, there's things boxed off so that they can work. In other words, if you're at a busy area, in a copy machine, a coffee spot, you have to have a space carved out so that they can stand there and feel safe that someone's not going to encroach upon their space. There are things like that we have to do. We have to make sure that the right barriers are up so that they can work in comfort. If they're not comfortable and safe, they're not going to give you the best them. And in turn, they may not serve your clients or patrons the same way. Now, if your patrons come in and they see all of your people being taken care of, they're absolutely going to feel safer in your establishment. So from that standpoint, and also taking their temperatures as they come in, people appreciate that. And what that does, now that we're talking about the employees as one pillar, we're talking about the clients as another pillar, or patrons as another pillar. And the third pillar is something that we found very prevalent, and that's perception. The perception that your company is doing well and taking all of the right precautions to make sure that you're safe, that your employees are safe. What that does is that leaves people feeling comfortable. That level of comfort is where everyone's suffering. So if someone comes into your establishment and feels comfortable, they're going to come back forever. If someone comes into your establishment right now and does not feel comfortable because your employees aren't masked, you're not being questioned and having your temperature taken, it's not that they're not going to come back during this COVID environment. They're never going to come back because they're not going to feel as though you felt that they were important enough. So I really do believe that the three pillars are the key. Making sure that your employees feel supported and are safe, your clients and patrons feel supported and safe, and then the perception that you're doing everything right simply by doing everything right.
Very good. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. We're going to move from the business side of things to the human side of things. Asking your question, what's it like to have the virus? How does it affect your family? What is a recovery like? What do all of these things compounded together mean for your employees and their family members, and how they are able or not able to come back to work? We're very fortunate today to have a survivor of COVID-19 with us who can explain all the parameters of what he went through when he was diagnosed with the virus. Dennis, welcome. Please take a few moments to share your story.
Thanks, Bob, and thank you for having me. My story is probably typical of a lot of people. First of all, to preface, I'm a bad patient. I refuse to go to a hospital or anything until I absolutely have to. I contracted a fever on a Sunday. By the following Saturday, I was admitted to the hospital, and I spent 16 days there before the hospital would release me, going through not even all the symptoms of COVID, but the major ones, high fever and shortness of breath. I will tell you, it's the worst experience I've ever been through from an illness standpoint in my life. It was horrific in the sense that you're all alone because you're not allowed to have visitors. So though we did a lot through FaceTime, I didn't have the opportunity to see my family on a regular basis, physically. As far as how it affected my family, well, unfortunately with my family, we got hit pretty hard. My wife contracted a mild form of COVID while I was in the hospital. My second son had the same level of COVID while I was in the hospital. And my oldest son had a little bit more severe case than my wife and my other son, but a little less than I. And my daughter had no symptoms at all. And we all lived in the same house. So in my case, I've seen every aspect just in my own home of different levels of COVID. In my life, unfortunately, I've seen all levels from my daughter's type of 0 symptoms to death. So they're all different levels of COVID. The best way I can say I got through it was family and friends. Extreme levels of support is really what got me through. My family was very good with medical support, fortunately for me. My wife is a registered nurse. God bless her, because she was trying to heal herself while taking care of the other members of my family. So she did an amazing job with that.
If you don't mind, I'd like to expand on this a little bit on the recovery process. Several businesses are going to have employees coming back to work who have had the virus. And you shared with me some of the challenges in recovery. Would you mind sharing it with our audience?
Yeah, the biggest challenge is you don't know right away how your personal recovery is going to be. Some people recover very quickly. My personal recovery is still ongoing, and I'm still learning what my limitations are. Specifically to me is my oxygen levels and my respiratory system. I was a very active individual. Now it's day by day. I'm still learning what my body can do, how far I can push it. I have good days, I have bad days. And they all deal with the respiratory part of the recovery. And really, you don't know, because we're still learning about this disease. Even when I was in the hospital, they were testing certain things on me, treatment-wise, because the doctors were still learning the disease. So I talked to a few business owner clients. They've asked me the similar question, and my answer to them has been time. You got to give them some time. You have to talk to your COVID affected employees to determine their level of exposure to the disease, the virus, and from there you can kind of grasp of, okay, what's the next step? Some might not have any issues. I personally still have some restrictions. I found out a couple of days ago I'm very sensitive to dust now, where I was not that way before. I found out very quickly the first time I went to the supermarket. I can't wear my mask for long periods of time because it will trigger shortness of breath. So you're learning all this. And the best way for business owners is to really talk to their employees to find out what they went through to get a good idea of what to expect in the future.
Well, thank you very much. We're really grateful that you and your family are on the road to recovery.
Thank you.
And although it's a slow path that you're following, I'm sure you're going to get back to being 100%.
Let's hope.
So I sincerely appreciate you sharing that personal story with our audience. Thank you again.
Thank you.
I would like to now go to our Zoom participants who are online and have sent in a few questions for our panel. And so the first question will go to Deena. Deena, this is from Catherine Rabidis of New York Life, an ABA member. And she is asking if employee is asking to physically report to work, but it has an underlying medical condition, such as asthma, which makes them fearful to do so. Does the employer have to accommodate them?
That's going to be a situation I think most employers are going to face at some point as we reopen. The key to how the employer should respond really lies in a very individual fact analysis of, is the employee fearful, or does the employee have a medical reason that prevents them from physically reporting? So simply being afraid that I might catch the virus or I might get sick, if your state is allowing you to reopen and you are following the guidelines of CDC as well as your state requirements, employers do have the right to require their employees physically report once they are legally allowed to do so. However, if you have an employee who is reporting a medical reason why this new environment might not be safe for them, the employer needs to pause for a moment and do an ADA analysis. They may have a legal obligation to reasonably accommodate that employee in this environment, and that accommodation may just be not requiring them to physically report.
That was great. Thank you very much. Cheryl, the next question is for you from Fred Tudor, an attorney with Moskowitz, Brown, and Callan. Fred is also a member of ABA, and his question is, what level of detail should be included in my cash flow projections?
It's a great question, Fred. Thank you for asking. So every business is unique. I like to do for our clients, and I think it helps the client, give the most detail as you possibly can. Week by week, of course, we like to do the level of detail client by client when you expect your clients to actually physically pay you. You know their history, you know their habits, you know when they're going to respond when an invoice is sent. So do line by line, client by client. On the expense side, again, you know when your utility bill is due, you know when your rent is due, et cetera, et cetera. So the greater detail, the easier it is to track what's happening not only this week, but what's coming in the future.
Great. Thank you very much. Chad, we have one for you from George Ruthhauser, ABA member from Gavo Communications. And we know that your company services a lot of people at home. You do a lot of home care. And we have previously talked about what businesses need to do to create a safe environment. Can you tell us what options are available to care for a loved one or an elderly person at home, especially if someone has to go back to work and is unable to care for them?
Absolutely, and that's a big stressor that a lot of people are experiencing right now, especially with this flight home that we've experienced. Lots of people are home right now. And when folks are going back to work, now we have a situation because their parents, they don't know what to do. They don't know if there's a safe option. You have to, depending where you are, obviously every company is going to have a different response. Getting home care in place is a very, very easy option. There's no barriers to it. And what it enables you to do is go to work and produce without that fear, and having that ability to check base with home, check with the caregiver, check with your mom or your dad or your elderly loved one. It's an easy button to pull. There's no barriers. You don't have to go into, move anyone or do anything like that. But there's some questions that you have to ask of your provider. You want to know that people are being screened and that their temperatures are being taken. You want to know that there's appropriate PPE. You want to know what their track record is. Those are the questions that you want to ask your provider, as well as, are people being tested? Are the employees being tested as well? These are very important questions to ask your provider. Once you feel comfortable with that, having care at home, even though you're worried about an exposure, you have to weigh it out, risk versus reward. The risk of your elderly loved one, if they're alone, that risk may outweigh the worry of a COVID exposure. So if you're taking care of that in a very responsible way and you have a company that's handling that responsibly, you'll be able to enter the workforce with a gusto.
Great, and it's very valuable information because many people are facing that problem and are going to be facing it for quite some time.
That's right.
So thank you for that. Dennis, we have a question for you from Brad Kane from Crazy Good Digital, and his question is, are there any lingering medical issues after an employee has been cleared of the virus?
Depending on their level of their COVID virus, yes. I was hospitalized for 16 days. I have lingering shortness of breath issues. Some people have, I've heard, stomach issues. Their digestive system has been affected in some minor way. There is an ongoing set of issues that each individual is going to have to define themselves. I find that people that were hospitalized on oxygen and ventilators at that level all have lingering respiratory issues. And that's something to be concerned with and talk to your employees about.
Yes, and in our world, we seem to associate a lot with people who work in offices and office complexes. I would imagine that people who have to do physical labor are really challenged in a much greater way as they recover from the virus. Is there a way for you to speak to that?
I don't have a very physically demanding job, but I'll tell you this story. There was one day I was feeling really good. So I decided to do some yard work. Well, I was out there for about 3.5, 4 hours, and I thought I was 100%, I'm back. That was not the case. It was about 12:30 in the afternoon, and I was done for the day. I was done the very next day. I did not have normal energy levels for about a day and a half. So yeah, physically demanding work. If you were hospitalized and on oxygen or a ventilator, it will affect you. I know a friend who was on a ventilator in a coma. He's battling it similar to the way I am. He goes for a run for a few miles every day just to build up his stamina. I train on an indoor bike. I do that as much as possible because we don't know. We don't know if there is any cure. We're just going by, okay, not feeling good, let me build up my stamina. And there hasn't been any definitive solutions. So physicality will be affected if they've had that severe case of COVID.
Very good. Thank you again. Deena, we have a question from Sharon Kornstein, who is a member of ABA, and her company is Image Design Consulting. This is very relevant to what's going on right now in our area. In the event school closures continue in the fall, in any capacity, and an employee says they can't report to work as a result, what rights do the employers have to replace these workers?
It's a very good question. It's probably a question that every employer is going to be facing, as right now what's happening with the schools is unknown. Under the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, Congress expanded FMLA leave to include this very situation where a working parent cannot report to work because their child care or school is closed and they need to be home to care for their children. So under that law, employers first have to provide 12 weeks of paid leave. If it continues beyond the 12 weeks, or if you have already exceeded that leave for a different reason, then yes, employers would be able to lay off that person because of an inability to report to work and rehire. But some considerations they should be mindful of before doing that is whether or not remote work is available. Because even if the employee is unable to physically report to work, you should inquire whether or not they can do so remotely. And again, that might be something required by your state's reopening. For example, here in New Jersey, Governor Murphy's plan of reopening requires businesses to allow telecommuting whenever possible through the last stage. So in that situation, you would not be able to lay off your employee if they're able to work remotely.
Terrific. And since we approached the L word, layoff, I would like to ask a question of my own, which I think the definition people do not know the answer to. What is the difference between being laid off and being furloughed?
It's a good question. So with a furlough, there is an expectation that you're going to be recalled. That's the biggest difference. It's sort of like a temporary layoff or termination, but we expect to bring you back. With a layoff, it's typically a reduction in workforce. The employee hasn't done anything wrong, but they're unable, for whatever reason, financial reasons, lack of work, able to report to work. Whereas a termination, and I probably misspoke before, when I said layoff, it would be if an employee was unable to report to work, but the employer had work for them, that would be a termination, not a layoff. With a termination, it's the employee has done something wrong or is refusing to work, and therefore they'll be terminated.
Great. Thank you for clearing that up. Cheryl, we are back to you. Lou Panaccio from Keller Williams in Morristown has asked, what expense line items are the first to look at and will have the greatest impact on your cash flow?
Another great question. Thank you, Lou. The biggest expense line items that can have the greatest impact on your cash flow, of course, are your labor, your salaries and payroll taxes for your team, your rent or your mortgage payments, and your insurance are the three big ones. I think we've all kind of alluded to communication, and I think in this case, in preparing for the future of your entity, it's communication, not only with your team, with your customers, and also with your vendors. So have those conversations with your mortgage holder, have those conversations with your insurance broker, see if there's some accommodation that they can make for you to extend payment terms and help you succeed and plow through and have positive cash flow.
Terrific. Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.
This will end our Q&A portion of the program. I would like to speak briefly about networking and the new face of networking since the pandemic. And what it's presented is traditionally people were networking for referrals for building their business. What has happened over the last 4 or 5 months is networking has become a resource people that are available to help you do business. And that's what we're displaying here this morning. All of our panelists are members of American Business Associates. All of our questions came from American Business Associate members. As you can see, there is a very diverse group of people who are experts in their field. And this is the importance of networking today. It is not a major priority, although everyone wants to do it and get a referral, because that's how you build your business and finance the opportunities to network. But in reality, what networking has become is a series of resources for companies around the country. So I would like to thank our panelists today, Cheryl Mucha, CFO Your Way, thank you. Deena Rosendahl, a labor and employment attorney, Chad from Seniors in Place, and of course, our recovering COVID virus member, Dennis. Thank you very much, Dennis, for sharing your story. I would like to thank the Zoom audience for their attending today's seminar. And I would like to thank Brian Brodeur, executive producer and founder of East Main Media. I'm Bob Putt. Please stay safe and mask up. Thank you.